I'm pretty much leaning on the side that Confederation, as it is a bit of a failed experiment, and for a couple of reasons. But the primary reason, I mean, the Americans show us the opposite. But I think we're too big of a country with too many regions, and it's just too darn hard to find commonality. And I think no matter what, we're going to be definitely as a confederation like we are, that won't work. Maybe as a republic like the U.S. with states where they have the real power, and but I find Confederation, our version of it, to be kind of a broken experiment, and I don't see an easy fix other than a complete gut and restart. And that's not going to happen. So I'd rather just leave. And if I thought Alberta was going to leave soon, I wouldn't reinvent the wheel. I would go around the world and look at what systems work where, and then just say, let's do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that might be a challenge, because even looking around the world, I don't see a lot of really good democracies. Actually, in fact, I think weirdly, why do democracies come and go and fall out of favor? Like, it does look like, I would have always thought that democracy would be so robust, but they seem to be fragile, more fragile than I thought. So kudos to the Americans, and maybe to us. Like, we've kept it going for a long time. So yeah,
I think, and sorry, James, I'm kind of bogarting the mic here. I'll let you have some thoughts after this. I kind of think that democracies can be robust when you have really strong social buy-in to a project, kind of, and you've got a lot of homogeneity in your population, and I don't mean in a racial way. I mean in like an attitude way.
Culture,
and you see that
attitude,
in yeah, exactly. And I think maybe when a modern liberal democracy gets maybe a little long in the tooth, some of those ideals that it promotes somewhat ironically have an effect of actually dividing the populace with too much individuality, and then you never reach consensus on stuff. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, no, that absolutely does. I mean, that's the it's interesting that the couple of things come to mind. First of all, the first thought I was thinking of is democracy, and a good successful democracy that brings a lot about with it comfort and luxury and spare time creates a problem, right? And I think we see that's one of the problems we see. I mean, when I look at governments across the spectrum and some of the things that they're talking about, I'm like, yeah, we have too much spare time on our hands. So now we're dividing ourselves over stuff that's absolutely ridiculous, right? Like, the water's good, the streets are good, the schools are good. So now we're going to fight over whether or not there should be bicycle lanes in winter. I'm like, oh my God, okay. Like, maybe it's a bad example, but I think it brings about some of that. So we fight over things that when you really think about it, you go, what the hell are we fighting over? Like, this is ridiculous. And then that leads to what you were hinting at, which is we fight over things, and then to get our point, some of the things we're fighting over or demanding is like, well, I need this because, right? Society needs to protect all of us, and I'm not getting something, and I almost need to make an excuse for wanting something. I need and so now we try to one up each other in the terms of the needs, which leads to a victimhood. Like, we want something from the government, right? I mean, the government gives you money because you're raising kids, and the other guy goes, well, I don't have kids, but I want something. So they got to come up with something. And the next thing you know, now we're playing victims, and we're trying to one up each other. And that's the whole thing, that whole victimhood. What's it called? The intersection of like the whole we get back down to being individuals, which is where, and we can solve that problem easily with these inalienable rights and forget about all the government and go back to being anarchists. Like, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
So a democracy assumes that everybody's well informed, or like it can only function if people have the right information. So that's our first flaw, is that Canada and our media and just the general amount of knowledge and understanding that the average person has is not robust enough for us to be making well-informed decisions. Yep. And we've also got our the way that we're set up with our provinces, the way that we're set up with the number of seats geographically split up, and certain areas have a little bit more power in making like Canada-wide decisions than other regions. So you're seeing an imbalance, and this almost tracks like you have an imbalance from rural to urban, but you also have an imbalance from west to east. And the other thing is, when you have some of these imbalances and when you have certain incentives, you will naturally get behavior following whatever incentive there is. So if there is, right now with Quebec, you have the incentive that the equalization payments disproportionately end up in Quebec right now. But that also hinges on how much energy they make. And because their numbers are a certain way, if they increase their energy output, their equalization payments would go down, and that would be recalculated. And the benefit they get, just like how nobody wants to reduce the amount of benefit they get when they're a victim on the individual sense or in the group sense, if the incentives are, well, you're not doing well and we're just going to give you money for that, you will find the behavior matching the incentive structure. Totally. And we're seeing that individual and also countrywide.
Well, in the case of the equalization for Quebec, I'll even say this. The equalization formula is so bizarre that certain provinces include certain things in the calculation and others don't. Like, I mean, that's a complicated one. To me, equalization is just a disincentive. It's one of those. It shouldn't exist. It just shouldn't exist. That, you know, it sucks that that some area might have an economic disadvantage for something, but that's just the way it is. This, because the equalization I dare say it hasn't worked, right? I mean, maybe not in the case of Quebec, but we'd always hear that in the case of some of the other maritime provinces, they are purposely doing things just to collect their equalization. So yeah,
and it hamstrings their own industry. I mean, we've seen. I remember. I can't remember exactly who was talking about it, but a lot of people don't realize how much natural gas reserves Quebec has, and they actively don't pursue the development of it, because if they produce too much of it and they got too wealthy from it, they'd stop receiving as much equalization.
You probably, on your show right now talking to me, you're talking to probably one of the most knowledgeable people in Canada on gas reserves in Quebec. I was the president of a Quebec-based gas producer called Petrolia right up until 2019. We got expropriated by the government of Quebec because there was a change in government. The funny enough, the Separatist Party wanted to develop the reserves, and we got an open door policy. They were very welcoming to us. And then there was a flip of government, and the Liberal government of Quebec did not want to exploit their gas. They tried to block us at every step of the way in ways that were so ridiculous, until finally the Couillard, the minister, literally took a piece of paper like this one and wrote an order in council on there saying there will be no oil and gas development in our area specifically, and he expropriated us. My boss wanted us to fight. I'm like, we're done. It's a losing battle. And I remember being in meetings with the minister, and he basically said he didn't even want to look for gas, because he said, why would I look for gas? What happens if I find some?